our amazing client success managers. Love this guy.
Hello. Love you
Hey,
too,
Eric.
bro.
Yeah, thank you. And then we also got Ian Patterson, CEO of Plural Lock. Hey, Ian, thanks for joining.
Hello.
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. And Ian is an entrepreneur with more than 10 years of experience in leading and commercializing technology companies focused on data analytics and machine learning. As CEO of Plural Lock, Ian built and grew the company, leading to its successful listing on the TSX Venture Exchange. So welcome, Ian, again. Glad you're here. And Eric, do you want to take it from here?
Sure thing. Thanks, Chad.
All right. See you guys.
All right. So we are here to talk about ransomware, and I'm glad, Ian, that you're here. I just want to share a little graphic here to get us going. So this is from ransomware.org. It's a recent poll. In your opinion, what would be the most effective step in ending the scourge of ransomware? So if we start over here, 9% regulating cryptocurrency. I guess that would be smart if you are sharing cryptocurrency. 45% better defenses. That's going to be our top answer. 20% more public-private partnerships to end ransomware. 7% government involvement. 1% less government. 13% nothing can be done. Ransomware is here to stay. I think I'm going to go with this one, or a combination of both. 5% say none of these, but 45% better defenses, absolutely the best answer. So let's just get right into it. Ian, first tell us just a little bit about Plural Lock.
So Eric, very excited to be here. I know we had a very fun pre-interview, so I'm excited to get into this with you. So Ian L. Patterson, CEO here, Plural Lock. Plural Lock is a cybersecurity company. We're listed on the TSX Venture, and we do a little bit of everything, but we're particularly focused around securing the identity. And so we have some unique capabilities around being able to identify people based on their keystrokes and mouse movements. So quite literally, the way that you type on the keyboard and move a mouse, we can identify who you are as a person. And the way that we use that or deploy that is we have a piece of software that gets deployed on a computer, laptop, desktop, PC, Mac, virtual desktop, etc. And we're able to provide continuous identity assurance. So the way to think about this is most of the time when you as a user prove your identity to the computer, you're typically logging in maybe once a day, twice a day when you sort of first get started in the morning. What we're doing at Plural Lock is we're actually doing continuous identity assurance. So whereas you might log in once or twice per day, we're checking 200 to 300 times throughout the workday based purely on your behavior. So why is this important? Well, 2 years ago, we had this thing that caused everybody to start working remotely. Now people are still working remotely. They're going back to the office a little bit. And so we're going from remote work into hybrid work. And so as a business, thinking about risk, it's really, really important to know that it's the right human on the other end of that computer, whether you're in the office, whether you're at home, particularly though when you're at home, because you don't have a lot of those physical controls, right? It used to be that we would just corral everybody in the office. We'd have turnstiles, badges, cards, keys, guards, elevators. You lose all that when people go and work from home or work from Starbucks, etc. And so we're able to provide a sort of a replacement or a compensating control for those work from home, work from anywhere types of employees. So Eric, very excited to get into this with you.
Okay, great. Well, let's just start right at the top. What is ransomware? I mean, I know it's in the headlines. It affects a lot of people. I'm sure most people that watch this interview will be like, oh, well, I got hacked, or I know someone who's been ransomed. Just a brief explanation of what ransomware is.
So ransomware is the threat that occurs when a threat actor or a group goes and compromises a computer or a series of computers, potentially a network of computers, and they will typically encrypt files that are important to you. They might also deny systems that are important, but in a lot of cases, it will be files that get encrypted. The business finds out that these files have been encrypted, and the communication will be with the threat actor to say, if you would like your files back, pay us a ransom, hence the term ransomware.
And I mean, I know there are different kinds of ransomware. There's like, where they actually take a ransom, right? But don't they sometimes, without locking up the system, threaten to just sell your information or release your information?
Yeah, so it's actually getting worse. That the threat actors are now getting they're varying the things that they do. So it's possible that when the threat actor deploys the malware, the ransomware software, they might first steal a copy. So they'll steal a copy of the data. They'll also encrypt the data, and they might sell it. They might say, I will sell this unless you pay me a ransom, or they might just release it unless you pay the ransom. So there's differing levels of badness that can occur, but kind of the central theme here is that there's an opportunity, in theory, there's a perceived opportunity for the business to make an economic investment to buy the ransom, pay the ransom, buy the data back, buy the decryption keys, or just buy the silence of the threat actor that is perpetrating the offense.
Right. And but how do these bad actors get in? I mean, I would imagine there's a lot of different ways, but with your experience, what do you think is like their main line of offense, like to get in?
So it's a good question, and this is what makes cybersecurity so hard, but also such a dynamic industry, is that there are so many ways that the bad guys can get in. What I would say is that one of the most common ways is for the ransomware groups to start with a phishing campaign. And so that would be a situation where you or some of your employees get an email. They think it's one thing, it turns out to be something else. I'm sure most people are familiar with maybe an attachment that they get. They double click on the attachment, and that detonates the ransomware that starts things off. But it could also be that the phishing is used to collect login and password information that the threat actors will then use to do something else. It's also possible that the threat actors will find a vulnerability. So maybe there's a vulnerability in a server somewhere because it hasn't been patched, and that might yield an entry point for the bad guys to get in. And then once they've found a way in, either through stolen credentials, through an email attachment, through some vulnerabilities, or something more esoteric, then that's when they will again steal the data, detonate the ransomware, enter into communications, and typically try to extract some ransom dollars.
Right, but isn't it true that a lot of these bad actors get into your system and stay there for a while, maybe monitor things before they even pull the trigger on anything?
Definitely the case. It's also possible that the threat actor who initially gains access will sell that access to another threat group who then monetizes it. So there's a group of bad guys called initial access brokers.
Right.
As the name implies.
It's ransomware, it's SaaS, right? Software as a service. Ransomware as a service. Isn't that true?
You are 100% correct. It is ransomware as a service. The other thing that can, when we're talking about sort of the ecosystem of threat actors, is you'll have people who develop the tools can in fact be different than the people who operate the tools. So the certain ransomware groups will build the tools and then work on an affiliate model where the people who run those tools will be less sophisticated. So they haven't, they're not some super advanced people who figure out how to hack in. They just use a tool, they execute the tool, and the economics. So if the affiliate gets some ransom, in most cases Bitcoin, then they'll share that with the ransomware group whose tooling they used. So it's become a much more complex ecosystem, versus 5 or 10 years ago. used to simply be a lone hacker. It was a guy in his parents' basements, et cetera, who was doing badness. It's become much more sophisticated now.
All right. So this begs the question, why should, a lot of companies are going to say, oh, well, we're just a small business. We're a little real estate company, here in, Smallville, United States. Why should they be concerned if they're just a small company?
Well, I think the misconception is that the bad guys are targeting companies. And in some cases, that's true. In other cases, that's not true. And so what I mean by that is it's fairly easy, because all of these are computers and they're connected to systems. It's fairly easy to launch a campaign and just spray, just see who is vulnerable out there. I don't care if they're big. I don't care if they're small. Using that unpatched server example that we talked about previously, it's very, very easy to go launch a campaign and go look for every Microsoft Exchange server that's not patched. And I'll pick on Microsoft just as one example, but certainly everybody is susceptible to this. So if they launch a campaign, they're just going to be scanning computers that are connected to the internet, looking for a server that is vulnerable. And once they find that, they will gain access. Now, if it turns out it's a big company, great. If it turns out that it's a small real estate company in Smallsville, USA, also great. The bad guys don't really care in that setting. And so just because you're small doesn't necessarily protect you, although there are ways that you can protect yourself.
Right. And actually, I read an article recently, I believe it was the Washington Post, that said that because of all the headlines with the major companies getting hacked and breached, that some of these bad actors and these groups of bad actors were targeting smaller companies so they wouldn't attract attention. I mean, hey, why go knock off Fort Knox when you could hit a couple bank? It's kind of makes sense. But should companies just pay that ransom?
Well, it's tough. I'm not going to say what a company should or shouldn't do without knowing more about the situation. But in some cases, you may not be allowed to pay the ransom. So depending on where you are, there might be either rules or laws in place which say you're not allowed to pay a ransom. One of the trickier parts of this whole equation is that in some cases, the ransomware groups might be deemed to be terrorist organizations. And so there are certainly rules around, financing those. So that's problematic. The other area that's problematic is that depending on your insurance broker, first of all, if you have cybersecurity insurance, there might also be rules around what you're allowed to do under that insurance policy, or what the insurance providers are going to want to do. So it is a very tricky situation. The best case, of course, is to try and avoid the whole thing if you can. And you can do that by investing in cybersecurity defenses and preparedness.
Actually, I have some data here. There was a study recently that found that 80% of companies that did pay the ransom were hit a second time. And 40% of them paid again. 70% of those paid a higher amount the second time around. And of course, the problem is, once you're hit, you can pretty much bet that your data, your information is out there on the dark web, right? And being sold to other, right?
Well,
you're an easy mark at that point.
Sure. I think the other thing that you have to be cautious about is, even if you pay the ransom, the decryptor won't always work, because let's face it, if you're a bad guy, you're going to invest all your resources in the thing that gets you in initially and encrypts the data. And even if you pay the ransom, the thing that the bad guys send you to try and decrypt the data might not work. It might not decrypt all the files. And so just because you've decided, hey, I'm going to pay this ransom, doesn't necessarily mean you're out of the woods. And so it's an important element here in the whole conversation.
Great. I'm sorry, there's a lot of noise outside. Hopefully it's not coming through. So then let's just get to the beef of the situation here. What can we do? How How do you, well, first off, a lot of people will say it's not a matter of if, it's when, right? Well, how do you feel about that?
I think it's important to be realistic, but I think that you can change the definition of what occurs when it happens. So I think there's a difference between just accepting that you're going to be hit and your data is going to be encrypted. I think what you could do is you could accept that you might not be able to prevent the bad guys getting in, but you can at least detect them quickly before they do damage. Or you can minimize the blast radius, meaning, sure, if they encrypt some files, okay, maybe I lose a day's worth of work, but at least I've got backups in the cloud, for instance. And so there's important steps that you can take, which either make it harder for bad guys to come after you, and so you can shift perhaps the attention to other easier targets, and you can prevent the damage if they do get in. You can prevent the damage by saying, look, even if we lose these files over here, not the end of the world, we can still operate our business. Definitely going to be inconvenient, but at least it won't be catastrophic.
So what can you do? Can can I just go get Norton anti-security, activate it and say, all right, I'm good. Or what else should I do? There's got to be a multi-layer approach to this, correct?
100%. I think in the olden days, 5 or 10 years ago, because time in IT and security moves quickly. In the olden days, yeah, if you had a firewall, if you had some antivirus, you were better than the average bear. Unfortunately, that's not the case anymore. And I was speaking to a former chief information security officer at a top 3 bank, so global financial institution. He was saying that on average, he has over 100. Or excuse me, at that particular financial institution, he had over 100 cybersecurity products that he was using. Now, obviously, this is a large financial institution, it's a large enterprise, so they're going to be a little bit more complex, but it does illustrate the problem that you need a lot of different solutions because the types of threats that are out there are extremely varied. So that's potentially the bad news, but I'm gonna tell you some good news. There's an apocryphal tale of 2 hikers in the woods. Stop me if you've heard this one, Eric. But there's 2 hikers in the woods, and they come across a bear. And the first hiker freaks out. Second hiker doesn't freak out, but starts taking off his hiking boots, lacing up his runners. First hiker says, "What on earth are you doing? You can't possibly outrun the bear. Don't be crazy." Second hiker says, "No, I don't need to outrun the bear. I just need to outrun you." So how does that apply to cybersecurity? You're laughing too hard. Are you being generous?
No, I don't know, because that just was pretty funny.
Okay.
You just need to outrun the other.
So how can you outrun the bear? So the idea here is that you want to make it easier to hit somebody else than you. So in a physical store metaphor or an example, right? Things you can do. You can put bars up on the window. You can make sure that the front door and back door is actually locked when you leave. There are certain things that you can do that are equivalent to that in your actual business. So what do those look like? Number one thing, turn on multi-factor authentication or 2-factor authentication, sometimes shortened to MFA or the number 2FA, wherever possible. This is going to be annoying. I agree, I understand. However, turning on multi-factor or 2-factor authentication means that even if your password is stolen, at least it will provide a second layer of defense. So how do passwords get stolen? They happen all the time. Your passwords could be phished. If you use the same password in multiple sites and some other site gets hacked, guess what? Bad guys now have your password. They can try and reuse that password. And again, this is happening in an automated fashion. This is not one-to-one, but they'll do a password spray attack where they'll just try a stolen password everywhere. And if they get in somewhere, great. So turn on 2-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication. That's your first step. Second step, use different passwords everywhere. So use like a password manager. Doesn't matter which one. You can use the one built into Apple or Android or your browser, or use a third-party one. Doesn't matter. Just use the password manager, and then make sure that all your passwords are in fact unique. So you can mitigate that password spray attack from being effective, and then you have that second layer. You have multi-factor or 2-factor authentication. Third thing you can and should do, back up your files. and try and back up your files in a way that you can test. So in the olden days, you used to have a tape drive that you would use to physically back up files, and you would physically move that tape drive or the tape to a physical storeroom somewhere that was in a bunker and had fire protection, et cetera. Nowadays, it's a lot easier. So use some sort of backup system so that even if you lose your physical device or your physical device gets encrypted or et cetera, then at least that you have some backups. And so you're going to turn a situation from being catastrophic to simply inconvenient. And then that's something you can live with. And then the last thing that I would say is try and get and keep a cyber insurance policy. It's gotten harder to qualify for and also renew cyber insurance policies over the last 2 years, especially. But it's an important element, and so try and have that in place. So it's not a replacement for the first set of things that we've talked about, but it is an important thing where if you have business interruption and cybersecurity insurance, you turn what is inconvenient into at least something that is manageable from a risk perspective.
And then, so how would Plural Lock fit into that situation? Because let's say I was using Plural Lock and I logged into my computer because it recognized me. That doesn't necessarily stop any kind of hacker, does it? Or, I mean.
So great question. So Plural Lock can help in one of three ways. So the first way is that we have a network of cybersecurity solutions providers. We have one in LA, Ottawa, and New York, New Jersey. And so we work with businesses on their IT and cybersecurity needs, and we help them from everything from buying a couple of hard drives to deploying an entirely new data center that's fully up to speed with all of the latest cyber and networking gear. So we can help with that. Second, our core products, Plural Lock Defend and Plural Lock Cloud, focus on two elements of the threat. So Plural Lock Defend, really well suited if you have a business in the hundreds to thousands or tens of thousands of employees in size. They're spread all out, they're working remotely, and you need better assurance that it's the right person on the device. So even if you've got your password set up properly, even if you've got multi-factor or two-factor authentication, what's the next step? Well, Plural Lock Defend is the step after that. So it's really well suited, particularly if you are in a regulated industry. So healthcare, financial services, if there's a regulator that says your data must be kept extra secure, extra safe, either from HIPAA, PCI DSS, NIST 853, ISO 27001, there's all sorts of regulations and industry compliance that pushes you to needing those things, SOC 2 being another one, then Plural Lock Defend might be a good fit, and we're happy to talk to folks there. The other way that we can help is if your business is using primarily G Suite or Google Workspace, and again, you're in the tens to hundreds of employees or thousands of employees in size, we can also help you on the cloud security side with our Plural Lock Cloud product. So 3 different ways that we can help. But bottom line, whether you work with Plural Lock or somebody else, there are actions that you can take to minimize your risk. And so it's important that you as a business owner try and take those actions preventatively, because it's a lot easier to do it on your timetable and schedule than on the bad guys.
Correct. Yeah. We often tell our clients, you would never leave your front door of your business wide open, right? You're going to put a lock on it. So, and you have to pay for a locksmith to come out and do that. You need to be business smart when it comes to security these days, because, like the old saying goes, pay now, pay later, and it just seems to me a no-brainer. But
well, and hopefully pay your friendly IT and cybersecurity provider, and don't pay a criminal organization, right?
Well, of course.
Yes.
PulseOne, people, technology, progress. We do put
Absolutely.
people first. There is a person behind that computer. Hey, Ian, this has been great. I've had an awesome time talking to you. Is there any closing thoughts? Anything we didn't cover you want to?
Well, if folks are interested in keeping abreast of the cybersecurity industry, we do publish a twice a week newsletter. This is the Bare Essentials. So cybersecurity news for non-cybersecurity people. It's called cybersecuritycorral.substack.com. So folks are welcome to get it there, or if you connect with me on LinkedIn at Ian L. Patterson, you can also sign up through the LinkedIn newsletter feature. And so that's the best way of keeping up to speed when it comes to cybersecurity. And if you're looking for a second opinion on, hey, somebody recommended X and we're not really sure what we should do, absolutely, you're welcome to reach out to me, Ian at plurallock.com or info at plurallock.com. We're more than happy to provide a second opinion. Totally free. We just want to try and keep the bad guys at bay. And if we can help you do that, then mission accomplished.
Beautiful. Well said.
All right, I'm back. Thanks, guys.
Hey, Chad. Sure.
All right, so we'll slide in to our Q&A time, and we have a couple questions. I liked this one that came up. It's I hear the acronyms EDR, MDR, XDR, and that I need them. This one business owner is asking, saying, what is EDR, MDR, XDR, and do I need all of them or just one?
So I see you're familiar with the TLA, the three-letter acronyms, as we say around here. So EDR, XDR, and MDR are all flavors of the same thing. So EDR stands for Endpoint Detection and Response. XDR is the E is sort of an abstraction. So it's a way of doing not necessarily endpoint detection and response, but other forms of detection and response. And then MDR is a managed detection and response. So effectively what we're saying is it's software that runs on the endpoint on the computer. So think of this as like sort of the new Norton of the 2022 era. We're not just looking at anti-malware, but or antivirus, I should say. We're also looking at anti-malware. We're looking to try and identify ransomware before it detonates. So it's a whole slew of threats that the software is designed to protect against. So some example vendors of EDR would be Carbon Black, CrowdStrike, Cylance, now owned by BlackBerry. These are all forms of EDR. Now, the problem is that EDR is going to create a set of alerts that somebody has to do something with. And so that's where the management comes in. So MDR is a managed version of EDR. So deploy CrowdStrike and have somebody monitor the alerts and tell you what to do. Whether you need it or not is dependent on the type of risks you have and the industry that you're in. So in some cases, you might have either a regulatory obligation or an insurance obligation or a third-party obligation to have monitoring in place for your business. So think of it like an alarm system in your small business. You might get a discount on your insurance by having a monitored alarm system. Not directly equivalent to cybersecurity, but same basic idea. In theory, you're safer if you have something like that. And so you might have a requirement to have that in place. Or you might simply just need it from the type of risks that your business is exposed to. You might need a form of MDR in place. There's the technology element, and then there's the services and management component of that. And you can do this in-house. You can absolutely buy the technology, manage it yourself, or you can buy the technology, have somebody else manage it, or you can have the technology, you do a little bit of management, and then you have somebody for the other part of the management. And so that's really where you might have like one or two IT guys. They're pretty good for 9 to 5, but you need somebody for the other 24 hour, or for the other, I can't do math, the other 16 hours of the day. So that's where you'd have a co-managed version. So all three of those are available. But absolutely, there's a lot of different vendors who can help with that. And it does genuinely reduce risk.
Thank you. Right, let's look at another question here. Social engineering. Can you help explain social engineering and how it works with cyber attacks?
Absolutely. So social engineering is a way of having something happen, but rather than using a technical attack, they use a social attack. So I'll give you an example. I might call, if I were a bad guy, I might call Eric on the phone. Ring, 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 ring.
Hello.
Eric, hey, it's the boss. I really need you just really quick. I'm in a meeting. Can you just text me the login password to the router? I need it. Can you just send it really quick? I'm in the meeting. Eric, can you send that? You said
absolutely.
Right now? Okay.
Anytime.
Good. Thanks.
Got it. Bye.
Social engineering attack. And by the way, that happens all the time. And they might ask for a password. They might ask you to run something. They might ask you to like, hey, and we see this a lot for new employees. So newer employees are typically going to be at a higher risk than existing employees because they don't know the culture yet. So they might get a text message to their phone saying, hey, it's the CEO. I need you to go buy this gift card right away. I need to send it to this customer. It happens all the time. So these are types of attacks that are attacking the social fabric of the business as opposed to the technical service, the technical fabric of the business.
Right. We sort of touched on this last week too. I think a lot of people get confused. They think cybersecurity and they think, oh, it's got to come through the computer, or oh, it's got to be something technical. It could just be like you just did, pick up the phone and call and you're in. Or as we talked about last week, just go through someone's trash. You can find all sorts of stuff, people forget about that, right?
Yeah. Now, again, it is, you can put measures in place. So the way to defend against social engineering attacks is to provide awareness to your employees. So tell your employees when they first join, hey, I am not going to text you and ask you to do something. If I'm going to ask you to do something, or maybe I am going to text you, but it's going to come from this number, right? I only have this number. This is my work number. If anybody else texts you, it's not me. Or one thing to do is if there's a significant transaction, which could be a financial transaction, like, hey, I'm about to wire money, or I need you to buy this thing, or I need to put this on the corporate card, pick up the phone and call me back. Call me at the number that you know to call me at. And so you have a second step. So have a process in place where you can verify that this request actually is genuine and that you have a process there. We see this a lot also, speaking of Smallville, USA, in the real estate business, we see this with real estate transactions. When you're going through a purchase of a house or purchase of a business, you're wiring large sums of money to people that you have not interacted with before. One of the ways that bad guys can get in and steal money is that they will use a stolen login and password. They'll get into your email. They will watch the transaction as it gets to the point of payment. And then when the payment instructions are sent, they will send a different bank account number. And so everything looks genuine, and you get the email and you've been corresponding with this person by email. I'm expecting the email to come in. Here it is, boom, wire the money, and it's gone. When actually what has happened is it's gone to a different bank account, and now you've got a real problem. So always try and add a second step to those large transactions. Again, be it financial, or I'm about to change the firewall settings. Let's just double check that I'm supposed to do this. Change it, check it through a second step.
Great. Okay, we've got one last question here. Describe what businesses have to go through to handle a ransomware attack. What are the steps?
Oh.
Is that a big topic?
How long do we have?
Yeah, right. Is there a highlight? Do you have a highlight version?
So hopefully you have thought through this ahead of time. So hopefully you have maybe do like a little table hub exercise and just run through, call your IT folks, either if they're employed by you directly or if you contract them, and you say, hey, if this happens, what am I supposed to do? And it could be as simple as step one, call your insurance broker, because the insurance policy that you have might cover the steps that you need to take. And actually they want to take it on because they want to make sure it's done properly, and you don't do anything. They're just going to take it all. So it's possible that it's going to be like, quote, that easy. But generally speaking, if you have a ransomware event, the first thing is to take action immediately. So it's not going to get better over time. In fact, it's usually going to get worse. Reach out to a professional. A professional could be a cybersecurity professional. It could also be a legal professional or an insurance professional. So in some cases, ransomware events or incidences are sort of triaged through a law firm, and they might also have experts to call in. And so then you go into what's called an incident response. And so there are dedicated firms who are professionals who handle incident response. It's a very specific field. And these people are absolutely experts at what they do. And they've seen this before. In a lot of cases, they've seen not only the specific ransomware, but the specific operators. So they know that like these people I can negotiate with, hypothetically, if we were going to negotiate, these people I can negotiate with, and they're willing to take a huge discount if we pay early or whatever it is. But the point is, there are people who do this regularly who have experience that you can leverage. And so try and get those experts either on standby ahead of time, or at least know who to call when it does happen.
Well, actually, there is a follow-up question, and it sort of relates to this. Do you know, are individual states, do they regulate this? Is there any way to find out, like here in New Jersey, who I could call if I get hit with ransomware?
Well, I think those are two different questions. So the first question sounds an awful lot like legal advice. And so what I would say is like better just have a quick conversation. Start the conversation with your lawyer and your insurance broker. That's the part to start to find out not only like are there state rules, laws, etc., regulations,
right.
but also in a lot of cases, if you're selling to if you're a business provider and you sell to a bank, you might have obligations in the contracts that you've signed with that bank that obligate you to bank level security. This is a newer thing that's occurring, but as businesses are examining their own supply chains, so people who service the bank or who service a hospital or who service a telecom provider, all three of those types of businesses are very heavily regulated. And so even if I might just sell window dressing, but if I sell that to the bank, I might now have obligated myself to things that are in theory shouldn't apply to me, but they do because of who I do business with. So that's why I'm saying start on the legal side to understand who are the parties or what are the bodies that might be obligating you to do certain things. So that's the first part. The second part is, okay, if an event does take place, who do you call to remediate that or to deal with that IR, that incident response? That's where you're going to look for more technical capabilities. And it could be that your lawyer would actually have the right referral. But in a lot of cases, if you have a cyber insurance policy in place, then they will also have some folks to talk to.
Great.
Good answer.
Well, I think we're done for this time. Any closing comments or call to action from you, Ian?
No, I think cybersecuritycorral.substack.com and at Ian L. Patterson on Twitter and LinkedIn. Happy to take the conversation over to social media and answer any questions that might percolate later in the day or later in the week.
All right. Well, thanks guys for joining. I'm going to share our next week's webinar, a live tech talk here. So next week we've got AvePoint and talking about the risks of personal information on internal systems. AvePoint's got great technology for M365, Google Workspace, Salesforce, many other cloud technologies. And so we'll be talking with Connor from AvePoint and diving into this topic. And if you guys want to reach out to us afterwards, here's my email address and Eric's email address as well. And so thanks again for joining, and we'll see you guys next week.
All right. All right. Thanks, Ian. Thanks, Chad.
Thanks, Eric.